Okay, all right. Well, in order to keep us on time, because we have three really big, meaty bills that I'm so excited to hear about each one, very valuable in very different ways. I'll first just quickly introduce myself. My name is Jeriel Clark, and I'm the Political and Organizing Director with Western Colorado Alliance. Thanks so much for those of you who are able to join us live this evening. Also, I want to introduce you to our panelists. Our first panelist is Tom Acker, and he's the president of the Hispanic Affairs Project. And he's going to be talking to us about the Farm Workers Bill of Rights. Megan Dollar is also with us, and Megan is currently at the Capitol. And Megan, I'll have you introduce yourself a little bit more when we jump into your section, but Megan's going to be talking to us about the really important topic of affordable housing and a particular bill that's working to address that. And then our final panelist will be joining us in a while because she's also at the Capitol, and that's Representative Lisa Cutter, who's going to be talking to us about the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. Daniel Haz is on as a panelist with us as well. He's representing, he is an intern for us with the legislature, but he's also representing the Colorado Mesa University Sustainability Council and will be available to ask questions. So with that, I'm just going to give a real quick overview, which is what I do at the beginning of each of these webinars, and then I will turn it over to all of you because they don't come for me. For those of you who are joining us this evening and might not know, this is essentially how it works at the Colorado Capitol. This is how a bill becomes a law. So our bill goes, it can be introduced in either the House or the Senate. It can have a prime sponsor in either the House or the Senate. And it doesn't matter which body the bill starts in first, it moves through both in order to go to the governor's desk. So if a bill starts in the House, you'll see that it's a bill titled House Bill. This 21 stands for 2021, and this is the bill number. And then if it starts in the Senate, the SB stands for Senate Bill, the year, and the number. These are the chambers. So this is the House chamber, and this is where the magic happens at the Capitol. And each bill, as it begins, goes through three processes. First, it goes through its first reading, which essentially means it's introduced and assigned to a committee. Next, it goes to a committee before it goes to the full floor. In this committee, committee members hear testimony on a bill, they amend or update the bill, and they determine by vote of majority to pass or kill a bill. If a bill is killed in committee, it does not advance to the floor. However, if it passes through, it does. So I'm just giving you kind of an example of what some of the committees look like. These are the House committees. And then these are House committee members that make up one particular committee. And the committees can vary in size. Some are a little bit larger and some are a little bit smaller, but each are made up of both Democrat and Republican elected officials. So once a bill passes through committee, it then goes to the second reading where it is discussed and has an additional opportunity to be amended on the floor. And then after it goes through the discussion process, the third reading is where the votes are cast and the bill either advances and moves over to the other chamber or it dies. Once it's made its way successfully through both chambers and when it's sent to the governor's desk. Tonight, I just want to point out that we're going to be highlighting really how we really do rely on the governor to sign these bills. And the governor is an instrumental piece of this process and can determine to veto a bill. And so when we move through these three bills we're going to be discussing this evening, just want you to keep that in mind because we're actually going to ask for some actions to be taken around the governor and not just within the House and the Senate. And so with that, that's just my little quick overview of how it works with the bills that we're looking at and moving through the Colorado legislature. And I'm really excited to turn it over to our first presenter. And as I mentioned, Tom is the president of the Hispanic Affairs Project, who we work closely with and are honored to do so here in Western Colorado Alliance. And Tom is going to be presenting the Farm Workers Bill of Rights. So Tom, I'm going to pass it over to you. Oh, and you are on mute.
I turned it off so I wouldn't make noise. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks, Jeriel and Western Colorado Alliance for hosting this important conversation. This piece of legislation is something that we feel is really important and way long overdue. I've been involved with issues related to agricultural work for a good decade or more now, and this piece of legislation will definitely be a very important and positive impact on the welfare of this hugely important labor force. And we also need to recognize neighbors, fellow citizens, community members in the state of Colorado. Jeriel, you probably have mentioned or will be mentioning Dolores Huerta's endorsement and her message to our governor that he needs to pass this bill. So in this first slide, what you all are seeing are the elements of the bill that is going to be addressing a number of issues that agricultural workers have suffered over the decades, and we could probably say over the centuries in our country and in our state. The quote you're seeing here is summarizing the importance of this. I think one of our colleagues pointed out the fact that why do certain members of the workforce get designated to work for less than minimum wage? Why do certain members of our community, why is it okay for them to live in poverty and not be protected by the other legislation and laws and resources in our communities that protect all other workers? So this is the genesis of this bill. We feel that especially after the COVID situation and the vulnerability of these essential workers has been so clearly demonstrated, that this will address that concern, future epidemics or pandemics in this case, and also just address in general health and safety of these workers. You can do the next slide if you'd like. So this bill, as I said, has several components. One, it would provide basic health and safety protections during the pandemic, and not just this pandemic, but in future pandemics. As you all know, numbers, CDC and other organizations have anticipated a future pandemic, and we need to be prepared for that here in the state of Colorado. One of the things that legislation going back to the New Deal back in the 30s prohibited the right for farm workers to organize. And without being able to organize, and this does not necessarily mean a full-throated, strike shutting down an industry. This is something as simple as going and talking to your employer about concerns that you have with another employee and not worry that there's going to be retaliation if you open your mouth, which is something if you've been involved in worker rights in our state, this is something that is a real present danger for anybody that wants to change things. Another aspect here is to ensure the right of service providers like doctors, like consular officials, like people that are interested in promoting safe practices, people that are interested in informing workers of their rights to avoid having wage theft occur to them. All of these things right now are impeded by the fact that many of the workers are living in employer-owned housing. And if it's private property, then the employer can block you or anybody that would like to access these workers from entering that property. This is something that we feel really needs to be changed. Myself, having gone out and tried to meet with sheep herders and range workers in the past, have found this to be a dire impediment. Something else that we really need to address, and something that clearly we're concerned that it's not clearly laid out, is the right to fair wages and fair pay. When we talk about a minimum wage, that's literally that. It is a minimum wage. It's not necessarily a living wage. It's not certainly something that's going to give you excess income. It's just enough to get by is frankly what we're asking agricultural workers in the state of Colorado to have access to. And also the right to have access to overtime based on rules enacted by the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Right now, this is one of the areas that has received some pushback from industry, and what we in the and the sponsors are actively engaged in is a way to negotiate this. There's a number of ways you can address the need for overtime, but there is no reason that somebody should work beyond their physical exhaustion and not expect to get paid that additional wage. One of the things that comes up when we talk about this is, if you're working overtime, who's taking care of your kids? If you're working overtime, what about your transportation? What about if you get ill because of working extra hours? All of those things need to be considered when we talk about overtime pay and minimum wage. A mandate for rest breaks. In this picture, you can see picking corn in the fields. A number of years ago, down in Olathe, the brother of a friend of ours died from heat exhaustion. The conditions under which these workers yet carry out their duties are oftentimes extreme. We know that this past summer, we had many straight days of 100 and more degrees. When you're out in a cornfield or if you're in an orchard, there really is a physical need for you to have breaks, minimum breaks over X amount of time, that the breaks can't just be for a short couple of minutes. It needs to be a fair amount and under certain conditions, providing shade, et cetera. So we have that. And finally, we need to provide protection. If workers try to express concerns about conditions, or if they actually call out an employer for abusive conditions, or if they call out an employer for wage theft, are there going to be retaliations? In the past, workers have been hesitant to call out for fear of reprisals. If these workers are H-2A workers, that could manifest itself as you're being sent back to your country of origin, or you're being blackballed and not being rehired the following season. Next slide, please. So, and when we're talking about basic health and safety, as I mentioned, the COVID epidemic really made clear the fact that workers are working under certain conditions, and they're also not receiving the health care attention that other workers in other sectors of our economy receive. Because these are essential workers, and if you know the scarcity of food on our shelves during the pandemic, how worrisome that was. Well, we are really dependent upon these workers, and the employers that hire them are also dependent upon them. And so when we talk about the conditions that these people are working under, whether we're talking about wages, whether we're talking about health conditions, whether we're talking about housing, all of these things add up to make for an attractive work environment. And right now we know over and over, we've heard about the scarcity of agricultural workers. Well, is that surprising if these workers are not working in conditions that they feel are worthy of their labor? And so it's not surprising that they would go and look for employment in other sectors of the economy. So if we want workers to stay in this sector, we really need to address their concerns and the shortcomings that they've lived under for many decades in this sector of the economy. Next, please. So in talking about the right to organize, it has been prohibited for decades now that agricultural workers organize. However, in many states in our union, there are legal support for organization. And we're celebrating the anniversary of Cesar Chavez right now. And we know that he organized workers in California. Dolores Huerta, made some comments in her Twitter in which she's asking us to support this legislation. And basically what's being asked is, why don't we get up to the modern 21st century right for all workers in all sectors of our economy to organize? whether you're down in Mississippi, in Colorado, or wherever. That is a basic connection to improved wages, improved working conditions, and frankly, a healthier work environment for all involved. If the employer is aware of what the concerns of the workers are, he can address them. But if the employer all of a sudden says, wow, I can't hire anybody, and he doesn't really know why, it's because there hasn't been the necessary communication for him to understand what he needs to do to improve conditions. So the sponsors recognize that not all workers will choose to organize, but they do recognize the need for a couple of workers to go to the employer and express concerns about faulty equipment, dangerous equipment, lack of training on certain equipment, and other conditions that might make it an unappealing environment to work in. Service providers include, well, I'll give you an example. In the summers, Colorado Legal Services has sent out interns to interview workers and ask about what their working conditions are, how everything is. And they have frequently been confronted by employers that say, you know, this is my private property. You have no legal right to be here. And in fact, at this point in the game, they do not. But we feel that can change, and it should change. And we're discussing, the sponsors are discussing with the industry about who should be allowed into worker housing, when they should be allowed, are they going to be interrupting the work schedule or not? All of those things are being addressed right now in the State House. But across the line, we have examples that this can be extrapolated to, for example, the consular office in Denver for the Peruvian, the Peruvian Department of State. Right now, they don't know where workers are because the organization that brings the workers in does not provide the consular office with their addresses. That's another example of how impediments to access to workers are manifested across this industry. Next, please. Okay, just wanted to finish this. Ensuring fair pay, minimum wage. We know that at least 40% of agricultural workers in Colorado are not currently guaranteed a minimum wage. There are various means to provide overtime, et cetera. But the thing we need to be aware of is if workers in agriculture are afforded the same pay as overtime premiums as other industries, they will be more likely to be available. They'll be easier to find, and it won't make it necessary for industry to go looking to foreign countries for employees and using the H-2A visa program, which is a questionable mechanism. I just received indication that I need to round this up. And so I am going to pay attention to the Master of Ceremonies. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So sorry, Tom. This one bill deserves, a full 45 minutes, as do all of the bills we're going to hear from. But what I can do is I can provide the full slides if you'd like in the document that we send out. And that way we can get to the last two. And we'll come back to what you can do at the end of this webinar as well. If you're available to hang on for a while, even if you need to step away for a moment, we'd love to have you in case there are questions at the end. Great, thanks so much, Tom. So next, we're going to pass it over to Megan Dollar, who's going to talk to us about local government's promotion of affordable housing. Megan, you're with the Colorado Municipal League and at the Capitol currently, but would you like to introduce yourself a little bit further and take it away?
Thank you so much, Jeriel. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. My headphones weren't working. Can you hear all right? Thumbs up? Okay, good. Yeah, my name's Megan Dollar. I'll just show my face really quick. That's what I look like. And you can certainly check out our website at cml.org for more info on me. But I am the Legislative Advocacy Manager for the Colorado Municipal League. And I run the lobbying team for CML. And there are 4 of us lobbyists there, but I have the pleasure of covering affordable housing. So I want to talk a little bit about about CML initiated legislation that's in the hopper right now, which is House Bill 1117. And this is about local government authority to promote affordable housing. So, and thanks so much, JL, for taking care of the slides for me. So let me start with the background on why we're even having this conversation. So back in 1981, there was a ballot initiative that was run by the citizens of Boulder that was going to allow for rent control on existing housing. And in response to that, the legislature in 1981 passed a law that said a local government cannot pass any kind of ordinance or resolution that allows for the controlling of rents. And the intent was on existing property. That was the intent. If you look at the legislative intent back in 1981, that was the issue. And so local governments kind of operated the same under our land use authority and said, okay, well, within our land use authority, we have all sorts of requirements and new developments. And so we will still require, we still can have some ordinances on the books to create affordable housing and new developments. And then you cut to the year 2000, where the town of Telluride had a housing impact ordinance where there needed to be a number of deed restricted units or housing in a new development. And that developer said, no, that is a violation of the rent control statute. And that went all the way up to the Colorado Supreme Court, where, and this was before my time at CML, but from what I understand, became a very surprising decision where the court on a 4-3 decision said, yeah, actually, it is a violation of the rent control statute. So yeah, the way that the statute is written, this is a violation, and struck down Telluride's ordinance. So ever since then, we've had local governments that have kind of looked at whether that's like, sort of ways to get around it or other ways of requiring affordable housing. There have been a number of attempts to say local governments can require affordable housing in new developments, because we on the local government side know that that was not the intent of the rent control statute. That was focused on, quote, New York City style rent control. And that was not, the intent was on existing housing. There have been a number of attempts to undo that decision. The closest one has had to passing so far is, the one that has actually passed so far was back in 2010, and that was actually House Bill 1017, which started out as a local government ability to require a certain percentage of units in new, a certain percentage of affordable housing is set aside in a new development. But ultimately that bill was amended that you could have voluntary agreements between a developer and a local government. There have also been attempts that ultimately did not pass as well, including the bill that really started this conversation again, which was back in 2019, and that was Senate Bill 225, which not only struck the rent control statute, but wrote enacting enacting language that actually authorized local governments to make these kinds of ordinance. And that wasn't just on new development, that was rent control, New York City style rent control that would allow rent control in existing housing. We supported that bill not because local governments were kind of really interested in like controlling rents on existing housing, although certainly there are some, but it really clarified the Telluride problem, which is where this bill comes from. It said, if we struck the rent control statute and gave local governments additional authority, then yeah, then that law no longer applies. So Senate Bill 225 ultimately did not pass. But what it did do is start a conversation around solving this narrow issue around the Telluride decision. Not saying we don't have to strike the rent control statute. What if we wrote a bill that's one paragraph long that says a local government within their land use authority does have the authority to promote additional affordable housing units in their communities. We did it via the land use statute. And we said, in order to comply, and for my purposes, I represent municipalities, a municipality must provide options to the developer in order to comply with the law. So if we meet all of those requirements, then we are not violating the rent control statute. And that's essentially what 1117 says. It was actually further, not essentially, that is what it says. It was further amended in the House to reflect that this bill does not allow for a local government to enact any kind of rent control on existing housing. And we made that abundantly clear. That is not the intent of the bill, although I will say that there are supporters that would like to see that. But that's kind of where we're at right now. So that bill has passed the House. It passed on a party line vote. I see Representative Cutter has joined us. I want to thank her for her yes vote on our legislation. Very appreciative. And so, thank you. And so we are in the Senate right now. And I think ultimately what would be really, really good is for the governor to know the groundswell of support behind this bill. I don't know if express concerns is the right thing. I think he just needs to be, I think it needs to be made abundantly clear. And it was to legislators that, based on our polling, based on CMS polling, based on polling of our supporters, this policy is extremely popular with the public in Colorado. This policy serves middle class individuals. This policy serves teachers. This policy serves firefighters. This policy serves police. And those are the people that are lacking affordable housing right now. And so we would, in addition, we are certainly interested in counting votes in the Senate right now, and we are in Senate State Affairs for good reasons, I should say. State Affairs is usually called the kill committee. That is not the case, as the chair is one of our bill sponsors. So I expect we'll pass committee, and we are counting votes in the Senate, but it's really important to us that Governor Polis knows that there's support so that he will sign the legislation. So with that, I will conclude my remarks. That's kind of my elevator speech. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I can hang on for maybe 5 minutes or so. I have to go testify in another committee, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Megan. That was fabulous. If there are questions for Megan, if you wouldn't mind putting them in the chat, what I would love to do is I can reflect them back to Megan and check back in and get back to you with any questions. So if, Megan, even if you have to jump off, if folks have questions about this bill, please feel free to leave them in the chat, and hopefully Megan can answer a few there. But otherwise, then we can, I'll pass them along to you as well, Megan. Perfect. Thank you so much. And so for our last big priority bill we're going to focus on this evening, really so pleased to be able to have Representative Lisa Cutter on with us. Thank you so much for making the time. You all are so busy over there today and every day. But you're here as a bill sponsor of the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act, and I guess who better to let us know what we can do to support it and also what it is in its essence. So if you wouldn't mind, Representative Cutter, I'd just love to pass it over to you and let you take it away. I do have a couple of extra slides embedded in this link, and I'll just move through them naturally as you talk.
Oh, fabulous. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm super excited to be asked to talk about this bill. As you can imagine, I'm pretty passionate about it and excited to make some change. So hopefully this all works out and my notes coincide with your slides. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Well, first of all, I just want to say that this bill is inevitable, I think, in the sense that, we're getting lots and lots and lots of interest, I should say, and pressure from consumers, from our constituents. People really want this to happen. And so I think that hopefully businesses have been expecting this to come. It's been in the works and been a discussion for a few years in various forms, and we're really excited about making it happen this year. We're not alone. Other states have done this successfully. Single-use plastic bags have been eliminated in California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maine, New York, Oregon, Vermont, Washington. And paper and plastic bags have been, combined, which I'll go through the bill a little bit down the road here, but the combination of gravitating from plastic bags to paper as a transition has been done oh, I'm so sorry. I misread that completely. New Jersey approved a plastic and paper ban. So I misspoke. So they did that in 2020. So that's even more dramatic, getting rid of both things during the pandemic, actually. So it can be done. It's not impossible. Maine, Maryland, New Jersey, and Virginia, along with several major cities such as New York, Baltimore, and San Diego, have banned styrofoam. So people are moving in this direction. I already talked about the grassroots support from constituents. We also have almost 200, or I should say more than, I think, 200 small businesses in Pueblo, Denver, Durango, Buena Vista, all over the state have signed on in support of regulating these single-use plastics. Only over 400 plus Coloradans have participated in the lobby days in 2020 to get rid of plastic, and nearly 41,000 petitions from Coloradans across the state have been gathered by Environment Colorado and COPERC in support of regulating single-use plastics. So the time has come, and I'm excited to be here. The threat of plastic is real, and I'm sure you guys are tuned into that, but I'll give you a few facts here. It's a threat to our climate. That's really what one of the most important things to me. It's just so many different levels, but the fact that it really contributes to climate change. By 2025, plastic production is expected to increase, that's only a couple years, 33 to 35 to 36% for both ethylene and propylene, which are the byproducts of oil and gas refining used to create plastics. Plastics pose a serious threat to human health throughout its life cycle. So the manufacturing, use, and disposal of plastic has been linked to cancers, birth defects, impaired immunity, endocrine disruption, developmental and reproductive effects, and more. It never goes away. Plastic never goes away. It only breaks down into smaller and smaller microplastics and gets into our water, our soils. It's consumed by animals and ultimately ends up in the food we eat. And to that point, we're ingesting an average of a credit card worth of plastic every week through our food, water, and air that we breathe. That is just, I think that is shocking. If people aren't familiar with this movement, I think that's something that really, really makes an impact when you think about that. Plastic vinyl chloride, number 3, and polystyrene, number 6, are also 2 of the most harmful plastics to human health. You know, the Denver Post did an article, I think last summer, about the plastic raining down, and they're finding plastic in rivers above timberline in the Rocky Mountains. That's certainly not how I want to leave our planet and to leave our environment for our children. We need to get worst of the worst. We can't, and that's unnecessary single use. That's why we're focused on these things. Nothing we use in 5 minutes should pollute our planet for hundreds of years. And we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. The way we look at it is reduce, reuse, and then recycle. And here's why. Only 9% of the plastics ever produced have been recycled. It's much more complicated and expensive to recycle plastics compared to other materials, and most plastic products and packaging cannot be recycled. The biggest challenge is that there are not enough companies buying recycled plastics to make them into new products. And plastics are very difficult and costly to collect and separate for recycling. Those plastic bags that, you know, single-use plastic that you see hanging in trees and, and all over the roads, they get hung up in recycling equipment and really can cause damage. And also plastics degrade during the recycling process, which means they can only be recycled a few times, unlike aluminum or glass that can be recycled indefinitely, a number of times, continually. Recycling is part of a bigger solution, but we also have to reduce and stop using these unnecessary single-use plastic items. And I think it's just changing habits. And that's something that we can all do. We're just using these things out of convenience, and there's other options. So the bill restricts food establishments from using styrofoam, and it gives them until 2022 to make the transition. So restaurants will often have the support of their municipalities. Yeah, look at all those. They're terrible. I don't know how many people were horrified. I mean, things are getting a little better about being in person, but we did a lot of takeout because we wanted to support our restaurants. And it was so conflicting and terrible because really the most important thing was to keep people going and not have, not be sitting in a restaurant with tons of other people. So we did participate in takeout, but there was a lot of guilt around that too. It's terrible. So let's see. So they'll have till 2022 to make the transition. And it's carcinogenic. There's plenty of alternatives. We all know this. The bill also restricts grocery stores from providing plastic bags. After September 1st, 2021, it puts a small fee on plastic bags. And after September 1st, 2022, stores can no longer offer single-use plastic bags. So they're allowed to use their existing inventory of bags for up to 6 months after the restriction. So we don't want to, ding someone for having excess. We want them to be able to use those. And it puts a fee on paper bags too, to prevent a surge in the use of paper bags, because they're not terrific for the environment either. We really want people to start using reusable bags. Now, the only thing about paper is that you can use 100% post, recycled items. Materials. That's what I'm trying to say. It's been a day. And so that makes them a little bit better. 60% of this fee will go to the municipalities and 40% will go to the retailer. So municipalities will be encouraged to use the new revenue to help small businesses make this transition. So that's it. That's the 30,000 foot here. What can you do to help? There's a lot of things you can do to help. It's tough. I'm not going to lie. As much support as we've been getting in the community and from constituents, businesses, it's a tough road. There's a lot of blocks to it. The current status is it passed the House Energy and Environment and Finance committees. So those are two big hurdles. The next thing, it'll have to go to appropriations, which is when we're spending any money out of general fund. The reason it's going to appropriations is because we're needing expenditures to the Department of Corrections for removing, that's a state fund, the state pays for that. And we need to remove them from, if we don't want anyone to eat off styrofoam, why would we think that it's okay for prisoners to eat off styrofoam? So that's where the appropriations is coming in. And that's the next committee. And after that, it'll be on seconds in the House where we'll vote on it, and then thirds, which is the final vote, and then it'll move on to Senate. So there's still kind of a long path, but we're keeping it moving as quickly as we can. So you can follow along at the link. Is there a link somewhere? It's pretty easy to find. It's at ledge.gov.colorado, I think. Very easy to track legislation if you guys haven't done that before. So you can do that. You can find out where it is in the process. You can reach out to your state representatives and senators to let them know how strongly you support this bill. You can, I don't know that, depending on where it is with the committees, you can always reach out to committees that are going to be voting on it and let them know. As soon as it gets to Senate, I think that's going to be maybe a little bit closer in the Senate. So you can reach out to senators, all senators, and tell them you support this. That would be wonderful. And also the governor. I think it's really important to let the governor know how strongly you support this legislation. We've had tons of kids testifying about this and really leading the way in this area. And honestly, that's partly why I'm so passionate about it. I mean, I would be anyway, but that just really helps fuel me and drive me because elementary school students, high school students, all over the state, kids have reached out and supported this and wanted to testify and write letters. Like that's just touches my heart that they're so concerned about what kind of environment we're leaving them. So that is what I have for you tonight. And I'm super grateful for any support that you can provide. And I'm really happy that you're interested in hearing more about this and would be happy to answer questions if you have any and if we have time.
Absolutely. Yes, we do have one question in the chat.
Okay.
And the question comes from Jake Neese, who is in Ouray, and his question is, can we ban distributors like Cisco from selling single use in the state of Colorado? That pushes the problem back upstream to the manufacturers where it belongs instead of putting the burden on individuals and businesses.
You know, and I'm not sure I have the correct answer for this, but I think the thing is that's like an interstate issue. So I'm not sure that we can actually do that. I understand your point, and I think it's well taken, but we're doing a lot to, in the future, move forward. We had a study last year. We passed Senate Bill 55, if anyone's interested in looking at it. And that was to create an end market recycling center, and part of it. So part of that is to drive innovation and you know, create new products and figure out ways to use the waste and to recycle the existing waste that we have. And part of it included an end market or a producer responsibility study. And so that's what that would be, is sort of like, but putting it on the producers of these materials and figuring out if there's a smart way to place a fee or incentivize them to produce less. We're doing a study about it to see how those materials are generated and used in Colorado.
Great. Thank you so much. I just want to go over 2 slides very quickly and then transition back to any questions for folks who are able to stay on, because we do have quite a few questions coming in. So just one moment, we'll get to them. I just want to share a couple of resources and then I'm going to go out of screen sharing mode. I won't stay on this slide long. I just want to let you all know. So Representative Cutter, for your benefit, and I don't think Megan is still on with us, but we have our membership and folks who attend these webinars are not just in one community. We're kind of all over the West Slope. So these are some of our legislators who represent us and are really good to connect with. And the actions we're asking for you to take tonight on these 3 bills are the following. So for the Farm Workers Bill of Rights, this legislation is going to need your help through every step of the process. This is a really big ask, and it's a human rights issue. So we're asking that you call or email your senator, your representative, and Governor Polis's office to urge support. The local governments that promotes affordable housing, as Megan mentioned, it certainly can't hurt to check in with your senator and ask them to support this bill. But we think that Governor Polis is going to need just a couple more touches to urge him to sign this bill. And as Representative Cutter just mentioned, I think that this bill could use support through the entire process as well. So asking your representative to support the bill first, once it moves over to the Senate, to ask your senator to move to support the bill, and then also really check back in with Governor Polis. So the links on the side here are provided in the document that I'm going to drop in the chat in just a moment. Usually in the webinars, I have it prepped in advance, but as I was trying to pull that link up, I accidentally hit live for the webinar. So I have to get out of my screen sharing mode before I can drop our document into the chat. So I just wanted to mention that before I stop screen sharing and bring it back to questions for the panelists. And thank you so much for staying on. I also do want to note that we have Daniel Haz, who is our intern for Western Colorado Alliance this year, helping with the legislative session. Daniel also sits on the CMU, the Colorado Mesa University Sustainability Council, and they do some really great work and are in particular really excited to learn about the pollution plastics bill. And we also have our lobbyist, Saul Malik, on as well to answer any additional questions. So with that, I want to stop talking again. I know we're at time, but for folks who'd like to get your questions answered, I'd love to invite you to stay. And feel free to ask questions to either Representative Cutter, Tom Acker, or Megan. If you drop a question in the chat, I will make sure I get it to her. But the first question that I'm seeing that hasn't been answered yet is from Delaney Young, who says, as an elected official who has testified twice this year and last year on the bill attempting to repeal the preemption language, that is the testimony that we can make that will sway the representatives more than very few, but obviously powerful opposition. I'm sorry, that wasn't a question, that was a statement, but a good one to read out loud. The other question is from Jonathan, and Jonathan asks, can we get the preemption back in the bill? Use mountain towns need that. Oh, us mountain towns need that. and I'll hand it back over.
So at this point, I don't believe that we can get it back in the bill because we made a deal in good faith with the restaurant and retail industries. It particularly, I think the issue is that, as you all probably know and understand, that it makes it difficult to when you have a patchwork of regulations throughout the state. And I do understand that argument. I think preemption should happen eventually. The reason we're being very careful about, the restaurants and businesses have gone through a pretty hard time. So we're trying to be careful and mindful of that, and, one step at a time. So I don't see it coming back in this bill, but I would imagine it'll come back someday. It'll come back eventually. I know that we're only one of 18 states that have preemptive laws. So the sky has not fallen in the other states. It's still working out okay. So, and I think the more national pressure and stuff, with some of these movements, I think it'll help move the needle eventually, but probably not this year. And I apologize, I'm going to have to hop off too, but I would be happy to answer any follow-up questions or connect with any of you. I am really grateful for the opportunity to chat, and reach out anytime. Thank you for the support.
Thank you so much for joining us, Representative Cutter. We still have, I'd like to just address one more thing while we have our lobbyist Saul on the line. Saul, are you there? I know you have a meeting at 6 o'clock also. I tell you, Denver must just never sleep. I don't know if Saul is still with us or not, so we might just have to circle back to him. I don't know. I would like to keep the webinar open for just a few more moments. If you have additional questions, I really do want to pass them on. So please feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll just wait so that if you're typing, you can get those questions into the chat. And I will make sure to follow up with you if you wouldn't mind leaving your contact information. I want to make sure that these are really three big bills, and really three big bills that each could have used their own 45 minutes. But we do want to keep the content short and user-friendly. I do want to highlight just one thing, and I will actually share my screen really quickly, and that is the link I just dropped in the chat is to a Google Doc that you should all be able to access. This has all the links you need in order to take actions. And so if you want to take a look through the Colorado Legislative website, if you want to find out who your legislator is, you just click this link and you type in your zip code and it takes you to your legislator. So you know exactly who to reach out to. And it also provides you with their contact information, both phone and email. It's a really user-friendly link. If you're ever interested in listening to the committees that are in action or listening to the floor in either the House or the Senate, you can do so at this link. You can sign up to testify both remotely from home at your own computer or by submitting written testimony on any bill. And then in order to contact Governor Polis's office, this is the link that you should click. So what we've got for you down below that are the three actions that we're asking you to take and suggesting that you use these links to click through to those actions. So I just wanted to share that with you quickly as well. So you all know that these three bills that were mentioned are really useful in different ways and really need help. So please take a few moments to think about what you can do in terms of sending an email or making a phone call. If you haven't done it before, it's not too scary, and I definitely would urge you to try it. It can sound scary to call your representative, but they are elected by you and accountable to you, and oftentimes you speak with an aide or you leave a phone message. So you're not going to be speaking to your legislator directly, unfortunately. And with that, I just want to thank you all so much for joining us this evening. If you'd like to go more in depth on any of these bills, please let me know in the chat. We can always set up an opportunity to have community conversations. I know I definitely love to invite Tom Acker and Hispanic Affairs Project back to do something a little bit more in depth so that we can really understand the heart and the essence of this bill. And beyond that, I just want to thank you all for taking the time this evening, and we'll see you at the next bi-weekly webinar, not next week, but the week after. And you can reach me at jeriel@westerncoloradoalliance.org if you'd like any help taking actions or have any questions in advance. And thank you so much.